Hi, this is Congressman Tom Cole of the 4th District of Oklahoma. It's another one of our weekly chats about what's going on in Congress. It's actually been a pretty big week in Congress, certainly for the committee that I'm privileged to chair, the Appropriations Committee, and for me personally, quite frankly. A couple things on the appropriations front. First, we finished all the subcommittee hearings for all 12 bills. That's big progress, and so they're all done, they're marked up. 6 of them have already passed out of the full committee. In the remainder of July, we will get the other 6 out. I'm confident that we will be able to get those out, and then they will move to the floor. Some of the ones we've gotten out previously, including some really important bills, actually moved to the floor this week, and 3 of them passed today, today being Friday. First, most importantly, the Defense Appropriations Bill, which is over half of all the discretionary spending. The Appropriations Committee controls about $1.6 trillion of spending, over half of it's on defense. And so this was a big bill. Now, I'll be honest with you, I wish we could have spent more money in this area than we actually did, but we're living under what's called the Fiscal Responsibility Act. It was an agreement between Congress and the administration last year. It limits the increases. We did increase defense spending by about $9 billion, roughly a 1% increase. That's as much as we're allowed by law. There are some, certainly in the United States Senate, that want to spend more. I'm happy to spend more if we cut more someplace else. And that's what we did. We actually cut more money than we increased spending this year, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of our committee for making the tough decisions. But we do live in a dangerous world, and we'll see as we negotiate further with the Senate, with the administration, where we end up. Certainly, if we do end up spending additional money, I want to make sure that it leans toward defense because, again, we're in a very dangerous time with what's happening in Europe and Ukraine, what's happening in the Western Pacific with China, and obviously what's happening in Israel and Gaza with attacks of Hamas and Iran directly on Israel. So these are areas that require us to be on our guard, and while we've made some modest increases in defense spending in the last 3 years, I think it probably needs to go beyond what we've done. But again, that's a matter for another day. Getting the bill passed is a big deal. Second bill we passed, also very important, Homeland Security. I don't think I have to tell anybody listening to this chat that we have a crisis on the southern border. We simply, this administration has not done a good job. We have lots of illegal entries. We have an enormous amount of illegal drugs, fentanyl in particular, coming in, killing a lot of our young people. And we have a lot of human trafficking, quite frankly, where predators in this country import young people, usually young women, from other countries and abuse them. And that's all the consequence of a bad border policy, which this administration has certainly been part of. So I'm pleased with the stronger measures, the additional resources we have in this bill. We just hope a Democratic Senate and a Democratic administration will recognize the error of their ways and cooperate with us on what should genuinely be a bipartisan issue. Look, it's okay to disagree over immigration. That's a worthy debate. Although I always note this country is very generous in terms of immigration. Over 1.5 million people come here legally every year. Others come here, many more, quite frankly, illegally. That needs to be taken care of. But we shouldn't have a debate over our border being secure. We know it's not secure. The Biden administration, frankly, has done a terrible job on the southern border, and that needs to be fixed, and that's a matter for the American people to address in the coming elections. Third bill that we passed, also a very important measure, was the, gosh, I just went blank for a second, bill on state and foreign operations. This is an area where we thought we could save some money. The chairman of that subcommittee, Mario Diaz-Balart, did an excellent job. We cut about 11% of the spending in that bill, and he refocused the issues. We're helping our friends, we're not helping our enemies, and frankly, we're not being generous with international agencies that operate and pursue policies in ways that are antithetical to the interests of the United States. So I'm very proud of what Mario and his crew did. This means with these three bills and what's called the Veterans Administration Military Construction Bill, it was passed a couple weeks ago, we have 4 of the 12 bills across the line, but that really underestimates what's been done, because we have close to 70% of the spending of the federal government, the discretionary spending, has now passed through the House. I'm not critical of our friends in the Senate, but so far I don't think they've gotten any bills out of the committee, and I know they've not yet gotten any bills across the floor. So this puts us in a strong position to go into negotiations, but again, we can't do much until the Democratic Senate actually does its job and actually starts moving bills. I hope they'll do that soon. They won't have to sit down and have a bargaining session, but this is an exceptional pace by the House of Representatives, and frankly, I should note for the record, all of these bills were bipartisan today. Now, they were mostly Republicans, but there were some Democrats that voted for each of the 3 measures that were passed today. So that does tell you there's some appeal beyond just the Republican base in what these bills are trying to accomplish. Final point I'll make is I also spent some time working on what's been a long time battle of mine, that's to pass what's called a carcieri fix. This is a Supreme Court decision made in 2009 that basically, said, divided Indian tribes into 2 different categories in terms of putting land into trust. And if you happen to be listed in a bill in 1934, it's called the Indian Reorganization Act, then we could put land into trust for you quite easily through the Secretary of the Interior. If you're after that, you're not listed in that bill, then you have to go through Congress to get land in trust, which is much more cumbersome. And quite frankly, that overturned 70-odd years of tradition when that passed. Secretaries had felt they were given that power, whether they were Democrats or Republicans, liberals or conservatives. What's happened since then is we've had a lot of groups honestly abusing tribes, trying to exploit this, taking them to court, saying that trust land was not really in trust because it had not been passed by Congress, but had been made by a secretary. I've tried to fix this a couple of times, one with what's called a clean fix. That's the bill we're fixing, which would just restore the situation before the Supreme Court decision. It's worth noting the Supreme Court has actually invited Congress to do that. They just said our interpretation is to limit this bill, but if Congress wants to change that, it can. And so we're hoping it does. I've also offered what's called a carcieri light fix in the past, which is just to make sure anything before this decision that was put into trust can't be contested. So you don't have Indian tribes having to defend themselves against lawsuits from counties and states over the legal status of their land. That really hinders investment, it's unfair to the tribes, and again, everybody operated that way for 75 years. So the idea that we would go put other tribal lands and their legal status in doubt, put tribes to the expense of defending them, I think is just simply a bad call. It's worth noting this does not affect Oklahoma very much because our tribes are almost all listed in the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. They had been there for a long time in Oklahoma, lots of different agreements, so not a big contest there, but any tribe that's been recognized since then, or if you happen to be a landless tribe at the time, and some of our tribes in Oklahoma exist in Oklahoma, but actually don't have a designated historic reservation, then you've got some real challenges in front of you when you try to acquire trust land for a hospital, for housing, for what have you. So again, this is an effort to move it along. It was good testimony. We had strong support from both Indian country and honestly from a lot of folks that just want to see equity, justice. Strangely enough, or maybe not strangely enough, whoever's in power, Republican administrations have supported this in the past, Democratic administrations. In other words, they think that the Secretary of the Interior's power to put land into trust should be recognized. That's really not been a partisan issue, and quite frankly, on this bill, you get Democrats and Republicans for it or against it. It just does not fall, and most Indian issues don't fall along these lines. But last point I want to make, again, we've made enormous progress in the appropriations process. That's really the big news of the week. The fact that we were able to move 3 major bills, over half of the spending in a single bill alone, which is the defense bill, the most important bill we work on every year, across the floor, and then add again two more important bills, Homeland and State and Foreign Operations. It's just a tremendous testament that Congress is doing its job, particularly the Republican majority is hanging together and getting things done. And again, worth noting that the increases here are very modest, and in some cases, like State and Foreign Operations, we actually cut spending. Most of the bills we have from here forward will actually reduce spending, and even the bills that increase it are very modest. They're within an agreement that was negotiated, again, between Congress and the administration. So getting our work done, and in an election year, that's hard to do, so I'm very proud of the House this week. I can't say that every week, so when I have an opportunity to, I do. I particularly want to single out the chairman of those three committees. My good friend Ken Calvert chairs Defense, magnificent job. My good friend Mario Diaz-Balart, as I mentioned earlier, chairs State and Foreign Operations. Again, very tough decisions, cutting 11%. And my good friend Mark Amodei from Nevada is our new chairman of Homeland Security. This is a big job, a controversial area. He got it through committee, got it across the floor. So they've done an exceptional job. And finally, I want to mention three other people. Obviously, the whole Republican conference worked hard. Anytime you pass a bill, you got to thank the majority leader first, Steve Scalise, who put it on the floor, made the strategic decision as to when we put it up, what we should do, whether we can pass it. And then the whip team, my friend Tom Emmer from Minnesota, his deputy, Guy Reschenthaler from Pennsylvania, did a magnificent job, lining up the support, working with members, working through issues. This isn't a situation where you can force anybody to vote. You have to work through the problems, and you have to count closely, and most of the Democrats are going to be voting no. And again, they held our side together, and they even picked up a few votes on the other side. So again, my hat's off to Majority Leader Scalise, to Chief Whip Tom Emmer, and his deputy Guy Reschenthaler. They did a great job this week, not just for our conference, but for the country. So with that, I look forward. Congress will go into a quick break for July 4th, so we won't be around next week. We'll be back in the week after. It will move the rest of the appropriations bills out of the full committee. I'm comfortable we can do that in the time frame that we've laid out. And then I'll be working with my colleagues to get as many of them across the floor as we possibly can, and position ourselves to go into a negotiation with the Senate and with the administration over how we should fund the government going forward. But we made some big steps in the right direction. With that, good luck, God bless. I hope you have a safe and wonderful 4th of July, celebrating our country's birthday and remembering how blessed we are to live in the greatest country in the world. On our national holiday, it's worth reflecting. Please also say a prayer for the men and women to put on the uniform of the United States and make sure that we celebrate this in safety and freedom. And thank those who came before them for their sacrifices, again, to make sure that our country has had the kind of unprecedented security that most countries only dream about. That's thanks to men and women in uniform. So God bless them as well. Take care. Talk to you soon.